And we're live. Welcome everybody to Virtually Connecting at the Alt Conference this year in 2016. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself first, and then I'm going to move it to on-site folks to introduce themselves. And then I'm going to ask the virtuals to start introducing themselves as well. My name is Nadine Abou-El-Magd. I work at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. I do online and faculty development, online content development and faculty development, a little bit of both. So I help the professors who are teaching online and blended develop their content online, choose the appropriate educational technology for their pedagogy, stuff of the sort. So why don't you guys the on-site buddy and the keynote speakers and our guests introduce yourselves?
Great, thanks very much. So I'm the on-site buddy today. I'm Teresa MacKinnon, Principal Teaching Fellow at the School of Modern Languages and Cultures at the University of Warwick. And I have two fabulous ladies to introduce to you today who are going to tell you a little bit more about who they are and what they do.
I'm Fiona Harvey. I'm an Education Development Manager at the University of Southampton, and I'm the chair.
Lorna Campbell. I work at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, where I work as OER Liaison Open Scotland. And I actually share an office sometimes with Susan, who is connecting today.
Hi, Susan. You can see here I'm thoroughly badged up, and that's because this wonderful woman via Twitter organised an Open Badges conference. So this is how I got to meet Fiona and work with Fiona, because collaboratively we put on an online Open Badges conference. I happen to be the chair of the Alt Open Education SIG as well, so that's how I met this wonderful lady. I was unfortunately not able to go to Edinburgh for the conference, for the OER conference recently, but there is another one coming up and I shall be at that one. So open is probably the key word. It unites all three of us, really. Maybe the guys could tell you a little bit more about what they're going to talk about while we're here.
Oh, yeah, that sounds exciting.
So I'm doing a session with JISC, Joint Information Systems Committee, on our digital champions, our Change Agents Network. So I have a team of students that I employ to work on education activities using technology-enhanced learning. So their remit is to develop digital literacy skills. That's the underlying thing that they have to do. And on their journey, they earn open badges. So in order for them to prove that they've been doing something useful, they have to evidence that through their open badges, and they have e-portfolios too, because they're more than just their badges. So that's I get the fun stuff to do. I like doing that.
Awesome. Virtual folks, do you guys want to start introducing yourselves? I'm going to say names so that you guys can go in a turn. Susan, do you want to go first? Susan, we can't hear you. We can't hear you at all. No, there's something seems to be wrong with your mic. Can you double check that and get back to us? We're gonna move on to Simon.
Hello there. I'm Simon. I'm over in Clermont-Ferrand in France, and I'm an English teacher. And amongst other things, I work with Teresa, who is over in Warwick. And we get language learners together. So that's what we do.
That's great. Dom, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dom. I'm at City University of London. We joined the University of London a couple of days ago, so it's a new name for us today. I'm an educational technologist here. One of the focuses of my work is learning spaces. So we do a lot of work on innovations in the HE classroom, lecture theatre, seminar space, etc. Also got a particular interest in openness, and I'm a former language teacher, so there's probably good connections to be part of here as well.
Excellent.
That's great. Yeah, a lot of what we do at Virtually Connecting is try to find these connections that we have with our backgrounds and our careers, and then take it from there. Negla, do you want to go next?
I'm also a former language teacher, and mainly academic writing. I used to teach academic writing. 6 months ago, I had a kind of career shift, and I joined AUC as instructional technologist also.
That's great. Thank you, Nagna. Can you just make sure your mic is muted when you're not speaking so that we don't hear echo, and because any sound that you do in your office is going to get picked up and the screen is automatically going to get switched to you.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking, Simon, so many language teachers, which is great. We can talk a lot about that. I did a little bit of language teaching myself as well a few years back. We had this volunteer program on campus where we would ask where we would teach the workers at AUC English when we were students. So it was really really exciting. Okay, Susan, are you connected? Can you try speaking so we can see if we can hear you? Susan? Hello? Okay. Why don't we get the conversation started? You guys, Fiona and Lorna, and Teresa, can you tell us a little bit about the conference? What's going on? What are your sessions? What are you going to be discussing during the conference?
Well, pass to Lorna first.
Well, I think in terms of what's going on at the conference, the theme of the conference is all around creation and collaboration and connection. And the co-chairs are both have done a lot of work in based learning. So that's kind of like the overarching theme of the conference. But just in terms of the sort of conversations that I'm hearing around the conference and the sort of sessions I'm picking up on, there's a lot of interest in the moment about lecture capture policies. I realise that they need lecture capture systems. It's an expectation of most universities. Most universities are already doing it. They're all thinking about scaling up now and realising that if they're going to scale up, they need to have policies. There's a lot of conversations still around learning analytics. And also, I think openness is very much there as a major theme. I think one of the things I'm noticing about conversations about openness now is that things are becoming a bit more embedded. I think there is a realisation that there are huge benefits towards using licensed content within institutions. The session that I'll be doing tomorrow is called Open Scotland, Into the Open, and it's going to be an overview of what's happening in terms of open education right across all sectors of education in Scotland. And I can say a little bit more about that later if you're interested, but one of the things I've been picking up on speaking to colleagues around the country is that a lot of institutions have committed to running MOOCs. They've been doing that for a few years now, they've been very successful, but I think they're also starting to question the sustainability of running MOOCs and commercial platforms. A lot of universities have sunk quite a lot of money into the creating MOOCs. They do not openly license their content. It's questionable whether it's usable. It's locked up in these commercial platforms, and I think there is a realisation that, well, we now need to think about the sustainability of this model, and one way to do that is by starting to look again at policies for open education resources and open licensing. So those are some of the things that I've kind of detected sort of floating around in conversations.
Yeah, and we've just had some really good keynotes already. So keynotes, they've touched on different things, but they've all had they've touched on our roles in our jobs and things that we do. So we had Josie talking about trolling, the digital literacy aspect there, and then we had
that was really
very interesting, and dispelling the myth. That was really good. I would have loved to have done like a Zappo question to that, with like a question and answer. So that was really interesting, and I want to take all that back. I want to just go back and go, by the way, I can point to this, that learning style thing you've been doing all this time does not work. And then this morning with the games and talking about how gaming helps you learn, and how we, informal learning, and how our schools should be changing the way that we're doing education. It's just thoroughly inspiring, because that's what we want to do. That's the technology that we have now means that we don't have to be confined in the way that we were, but we're carrying on the practice because it's not different, and we like to stay afraid. I understand that, but the web's 20, 30, 40 years old now. Let's move on, people.
Yeah.
But yeah,
yes.
it was, but in the sessions that we're missing now, there's some really good stuff. We were just saying it's really hard to decide what to go and watch, what do you go and listen to, because there's so much happening, but you can't do everything, and we'll be exhausted by tomorrow afternoon.
Yes. Yes. But Alt does have a great sort of wraparound platform, so there's plenty of stuff we can access before and afterwards, so you can keep conversations going, and the slides get shared quite well. But open practice makes a huge difference in those situations, because you just have, in a conference, often you just have that one moment to connect and to find somebody and have a conversation, and the great way about the web, you can miss some stuff and find ways back in and catch up. But it's interesting to see how the mainstream ed tech discussions are listening a bit more to those of us sort of who've been talking about blurring boundaries and formal and informal learning. And Simon, I can almost see is grinning at the very thought that we've been going on about for years.
Yeah, I think there is still a tension between institutional managers who are running systems at scale, and they have, these are business critical systems, and to actually make that sustainable, that's a job of work in itself. But I think senior managers are starting to listen to some of the arguments, particularly around openness, because in terms of sustainability and for the institutions. So it is absolutely. I mean, even if you're openly licensing the content that is being created within your institution, it doesn't just make it easier for people out with the institution to share it and to use it, but also internally as well. So there are huge benefits there.
I think one of the problems that I'm certainly encountering, I don't know if you guys are, but is that if you think about people that are coming into universities now at a senior level, they're businessmen, they're business people, and it goes against the grain to think we give away all this stuff. But what they don't understand is it's a culture, and it's about learning, and we aren't a business in that way. We are a business, but we're not a business in that way. We create the knowledge, and the students are part of our business. So they're not really a customer, because they are, without them we don't have a business. So I think the idea that we give away through openness goes against the grain for them. But the more you talk to them and it's getting to them, I think the more that I'm not giving away, we are sharing, and that's what universities and higher education and schools and there's a benefit there.
It's not an economic model based on scarcity anymore.
There's a societal good. Interesting. Livingston's keynote this morning actually mentioned how Games Workshop took off, because when he spoke about getting finance for gaming in those early days, and how people really had no idea what he was talking about in the sort of finance world, it was all new, and how actually it was a grassroots adoption, and then people start to listen, because there's a clamour around something. So he even stated Penguin thought interactive books were a daft idea. Books are linear. You get to those transition points where it actually relies on a groundswell to make change happen. So it's really useful to have people sharing information and making their voices and their needs obvious. And we've seen quite a lot of student experience
absolutely.
In this conference. And
if I may just take this idea further about the importance of students as content creators, and the importance of that, and the usefulness of open education and open learning and open resources, I want to ask you guys a question about what do you think are the elements that need to be there, or what can you do to foster that kind of environment in an institution or in a place that is a bit resistant to openness in education and is more afraid or sees the disadvantages of it more than they see the advantages, or like they don't see the magnitude of how useful this is. So what do you think? How could you how could you manage something like that? How can you go ahead and tackle that kind of problem?
I think you have to address it at all levels of the institution. I think you do need to get your senior management on board, and they tend to be very risk averse. But I think there has been so much advocacy work done in the open education space over the last 10 years that it's not that difficult to find policy documents, strategy papers that will actually make the case of the benefit of open education at the institutional level in terms of system sustainability, in terms of digital literacy, all these things that your senior management want to enhance to make sure your institution is the best. I mean, it's quite interesting that this is a mature space. It's 10 years since the Cape Town Declaration. It's 5 years since the Paris OER Declaration. So, you know, there's a wealth of policy documents that can be called on and drawn on. Going down to the other level, at the student level, one of the things that I've certainly noticed this year is a lot more student engagement in the open education space. I think institutions are really sort of working hard to encourage their students into that space. And I think this is all tied up with the idea of making and co-creation. And certainly within Scotland, we're seeing a lot of really interesting student projects that are creating open educational content. We also had an interesting case at the University of Edinburgh, and Susan will know about this. We recently had an intern working in the directorate we're based in, and he was working to release content under open license created by other students. So I think that's a really useful way to engage students in the process. And also it helps to enhance digital literacy and learning about open licensing. So, you know, I think these are just, you know, some ways to hit both, you know, your senior management and your student body. Within the academic, I think it is very, very important to have not just policies, but also support and advocacy there, so that I think having an institutional policy is not enough. You also need to provide the support. But at the same time, providing the support without the policy can also be difficult because your colleagues will, I think the policy gives them the permission to go ahead and be open. And if you have the support there, it shows them how to do it.
And I think following on from that, I think it's really important to address to the heart of the core of the university is the NSS at the moment. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with being measured in that way, but we have a national student survey and we're going to be ranked against that, and we can charge fees against that. And so to the business heart of the university, that's important. But if we take away the sharing of good practice and the openness, then our academics will become dull, they will become overworked because they will have to try and constantly come up with new ways of teaching the students the way they learn. So being open about what we do is actually a business need. It's a need to do that because we've set ourselves a task of assessment and feedback, and everybody shares good practice. That's great. But actually part of being better is sharing and collaborating, because just as Ian said this morning, you don't do it on your own. When you're in businesses, you don't work on your own. And I think very much that the reason they don't get it is because they're not doing it. So the more that we are doing it and showing, actually, look, nothing happened other than we got better, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I've got to put a plug in at this point for the the alt open education SIG, because on the alt site we have an open forum and we have a blog. And I also want to put a plug in for OER 17, which was absolutely fabulous. If you just Google OER 17, you'll find the resources.
OER 16.
16, sorry, I'm sorry, the years are flying by. Yes, I have no idea what date it is.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. Yes, we're only halfway through. So yeah, lots and lots of things to follow up on, loads of resources around there. So if you have questions and queries, we have an open forum you can join, and we can connect you with the huge, I mean, Twitter is a great connector, isn't it? There's lots of open conversations going on in the open in Twitter.
What about you, virtual folks? Do you guys have any questions or comments? Well, Simon is asking in the chat, he's saying, hurrah for Scotland, but does open favour the strongest? What do you guys think?
OER
Not at
is
all.
often accused of favouring the weaker in some ways. That, you know, that often there's a misunderstanding that open content is poorer content, which is never true. That, you know, you can evaluate course books and formally published journals against open resources. You'll find as many errors and misunderstandings in both. It's about, for me as a teacher, as a practitioner, open is important because I know that I don't know it all. So I can have a go at stuff and I can try it out. If I try it out in the open, then I'm going to find out an awful lot more because other people are going to help me improve that. So you have to be mentally open to that process. You have to be willing to engage in a dialogue. And Josie touched on this a lot in her keynote, that actually, you know, you put yourself out there, you take a risk, but you evaluate that risk in terms of your practice and your learning and how important it is.
But it's also, I mean, going on with the theme of the conference, collaboration. So, like, you know, Twitter, we met through Twitter.
We did, yeah.
We communicate through Twitter. You know, we do face-to-face stuff, but you need to be able to collaborate. And I think one of the question about OERs is that you put it out there, which means you need a network to share it with, and which means you've got some people are very happy just being on their own and never talking to anyone. That's fine. But, you know, in order to move forward, which is where we're going, we need to be able to be out there. And I think it's a skill to be able to collaborate online as well as face to face. And some people find it difficult. But if those resources are available, you don't have to. You can see them, you know, and then you don't necessarily have to contact someone to have use of it, but you can share. But I think it's a digital literacy again, isn't it?
And I think it's important as well for us as education practitioners as well. And certainly one of the other things that is very obvious talking to people around the conference is there's still a lot of flux in the education sector in the UK right now. There's a lot of institutions restructuring. There's quite a lot of insecurity in the sector. And certainly I've got quite strong personal feelings that one way to address that is through becoming an open practitioner. Because I think there are dangers with tying our professional identities to institutions. I think we need to have professional identities that are above and beyond the institution. We need to collaborate more widely. We need to collaborate internationally. And I think really the way to do that is through being an open practitioner. So that's certainly something that I feel very, very strongly about. And I think in terms of who does openness favour, I think in that case, it can favour people who are disadvantaged because really you're putting yourself out there, which can be a bit scary, but at the same time, it gives you visibility and it gives you a network that is much wider than just your own institution. So I think that's very important too.
We've seen some fabulous collaborative work coming out of like Wikimedia.
Simon, what do you mean it's risky for some to be open? Can you elaborate more on that? Because yesterday Josie was talking about a lot of risks with being open and being online and trolling and things like these. So can you elaborate exactly on what you mean when you say it's risky?
Yeah, I think that it's easy for us to talk about being open in certain contexts where we already have perhaps a position where we're actually employed. But I think for some students that may be more of a risk for a start. And I think for some people in some contexts where the hierarchy may not be very open to them being open, I think that also is a risk for them. So I think that we have to be perhaps careful about encouraging people too much.
I think in terms of students, I think I would actually disagree with that, to be honest, because I think a really good way for students to make their work visible is by being open. And again, that is certainly something that we've seen with our experiences of working with student interns at the University of Edinburgh. Those students that have become involved in public engagement, that has been massively beneficial for them, almost sort of more so than the actual, you know, the core of their degree. It's to have these extra skills is invaluable, utterly
Absolutely.
invaluable. If you go one step further and you openly license the evidence of those skills, you know, when you go to your interview, you can point at that. You know, it's not like the stuff is still stuck inside your institutional portfolio or VLE where you will never ever see it again. If you've got stuff that's online, openly licensed, you can see, here's my work and here's evidence of it. So I would certainly, that would be
I agree with that.
my take on it.
All the student champions that I work with, they have to provide, they create a portfolio of their work specifically, well, one for helping with their learning, because by doing that they're reflecting more about what they're doing and they have to think about it a bit more, but they're also creating a managed online presence as opposed to the random pieces of stuff happening, and they were surprised about what they already did around their work. So I've got a couple of students come up this afternoon or tomorrow who are actually, one's a swimmer, with the photo she had of her swimming that some professional had taken of her, and it looks amazing in her portfolio. She's almost a bit embarrassed about how much more she's done, you know. So I think yes, in some ways I agree with you that you need to be careful, don't go all out there, you know, but that's what peer review is for. That's what we do as colleagues, and that's why the collaboration is important.
It's about understanding.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'll just give you one example to illustrate. Last year I was working with a Syrian refugee. I didn't think, and he didn't think, that this was a good idea to have visible digital presence because he was fearful for his family.
Can I pick up on one things that I wanted to say was, you're absolutely right, there are some places where openness is a massive danger. And I think, you know, one example of that is the case of Basil Cartabeel, the Syrian Creative Commons advocate, who was detained by the Syrian government for 4 or 5 years, and whose name disappeared off the prison roll 2 or 3 years ago. And there's no knowledge of his whereabouts. I was involved, was it last year, the year before last, in writing an open book, The Cost of Freedom, which was all about raising awareness of Basil and his work. And that was a really sobering experience, because we were invited to write a personal reflection on what openness meant to us. And you're absolutely right, you know, we're sitting here in a position of privilege, and I do what I do. I'm involved with Creative Commons, involved with Wikipedia, you know, everyone thinks that's great. There are other places where that could be a real threat, and I think it's important that we never forget that, and that we never forget the position of privilege that we're in. And I know that Maha has really written recently a very good blog post about that. So yeah, I think we need to keep reminding ourselves about that, but at the same time, I think it also is important that we use these positions of threat to try and move forward. And I think I would certainly encourage you to have a look at that book, The Cost of Freedom, because there's some really, really inspiring writing in there.
I was in a conference a couple of years ago in Tunisia, and I was talking about my iChamps, how great, they all had this great thing. And it was a Maghreb conference, so it was a conference with all that, Libya and around the countries. And there were some students there who were brought along because they'd been away to America for a year on a scholarship. And they wanted to work with me because they wanted to have the freedom to produce stuff, but the institutions they were at had a much more conservative model of education. That I'm the lecturer, you are the student, and that's how it's going to stay. And that suits them, but the students could see the potential, and they wanted to have a voice. Various other means, and I'm encouraging them to create portfolios because they have skills and they have a way of demonstrating it now. The web has given them that freedom. They have access to the web, and the tools that I use mainly are free. I'm not trying to sell stuff, I'm trying to use it. So it's, I think by us going away to those countries gives them an insight into how things could be. Obviously when you're in Syria or you're in a war-torn country, there are going to be limitations, but I think we shouldn't stop talking about being together.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well, and again, this is something that openness can bring, is that it's not all one way. I mean, we learn as much from the experience. And again, it comes back to, you know, the points that that Maha makes about, you know, we need to be aware of our privilege, and we need to make sure that, you know, we are learning and we are receptive as well. And I think that's really
and we share
important.
Their stories. I think that's important. Anybody else?
Guys, I'm really aware that we're sort of ticking round to 1 o'clock.
Yeah, do you guys have to get going? I think we talked for about maybe 35 minutes or something. So I know you guys are very busy. You have to go to a lot of other workshops and a lot of other sessions and probably get something to eat in between. So it was brilliant talking to you both today. Thank you so much, Lorna and Fiona, for coming. Thank you, Teresa, for bringing them. And it was such a great conversation. I really appreciate it, and I am definitely looking forward to your keynote, Lorna, in a couple of days. No, not a couple of days anymore. That's tomorrow.
Mine won't be as a keynote, but hopefully there'll be people tweeting, so you should be able to follow along.
Okay. Well, hopefully, if they do a good job at tweeting. I was recently at a conference in Beijing, China. It was the World Congress of Comparative Education Societies conference. That happens once every 3 years, right? And it's a big deal. Like, you have so many parallel sessions going on, and you want to be attending so many at the same time, but you can't. So, and I don't know if you guys know this, but China, the entire country is behind a firewall, so Twitter is blocked.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you doing this to me? I'm in one session, and while I'm giving my own presentation, and while I'm giving my own, yeah, the Great Firewall. While I'm giving my own presentation, I want to be listening to another one, a parallel one that's going on at the same exact time, but I just couldn't do that. So please ask people to tweet tweet so we can benefit from that.
Lovely, thank you.
Right. Thank you so much.
Very much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
It's a pleasure. Bye.
Thanks. Good to be part of it.